Alright, so before we turn our compound slide, we need some idea as to where it's going to go to. So our taper was 0.05. So if I put in the 0, got to split that in half, same as we did before. Alright. So that gives us 0.025. Now we're going to inverse our trig. Alright, and that gives us 1.43 degrees. On the compound slide, you've got 1 degree, 2 degrees, but it gives us an idea where to go before we set up the dial indicator. Yeah, g'day again. The other part of taper turning that we've got to look at is how are you going to set up your compound slide to be exactly the taper you want. Our graduations are only in 1 degree increments. Alright, so how are you going to get exactly the taper you want? Alright, we've gone through and we've looked at our drawing. Our drawing says that our taper is 0.05. So we need to divide that by 2 and we need to do inverse tan to get an angle. And that angle is only to help us. So for mine, it ends up to be 1.4 degrees. So how do I get 1.4? So I can tap it around. Let's undo it first. Alright, undo all of our bolts. And tap it around so I've got approximately 1.5 degrees. Alright, oh. Alright. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the same formula for offsetting our tailstock, but our distance now is something you're going to pick. I use 100 millimeters because 100 millimeters happens to correspond with 4 turns of the handle if I'm using this Colchester. Alright, so I've actually set up the dial indicator on the end of my compound slide. On the end of my tailstock. Carriage moves quite happily, and I'm just going to line this in and zero it. Here we go. Go a whole millimetre just for good luck. Now, because it's at an angle, it's actually going to move. Let me zero my Z-axis. Alright. If I now move 100 millimetres, I should have 0.025 times 100 should be 2.5 millimetres. Alright. So, 1 turn to the handle, 2 turns to the handle, and that's 1 millimetre, 3 turns to the handle, about 4, I'm coming up, Alright, so I should have had 2.5 millimetres, and as you can see I've only got 2.36, so a little bit of a tap. Probably should undo it a bit more. Alright. So, yes, I've gone too far, but I need to go back to the beginning to check. So I need to go back to 0 and reset my dial indicator. Alright. So, dial indicator is not quite 0. Right, I could just turn the dial itself, but just wind the cross slide in a little bit. So we're back at 0, and we're going to do the same thing. 4 turns of the handle, and keep an eye as to how far it goes. So 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns, and coming up to my 100 millimeters. So you need to keep your left eye on the digital display, the DRO, and your right eye on the dial indicator. All right. Not going to argue about 5 microns, and there I am, 2.48 millimeters, 2.49. I could try and get the extra 0.02. You know, how much is your taper allowed to be? Okay, so if I'm happy with that, I will lock it in. And now I will machine my taper. Remember, you're now machining using the compound slide. All right, the compound slide is following that axis. All right, cheers for now.